Hey there, welcome to this episode of the Skiff Meetings podcast, the podcast for curious professionals embracing the future of business events. My name is Miguel Neves, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Skiff Meetings, and in this episode titled Community Before Events, I have the pleasure of speaking with Luke Bilton, the co-founder of Life Science Networks. In our conversation, we talk about things like how different event technology companies fared coming out of the COVID pandemic, why matchmaking and a well-structured meeting program is the secret sauce for events, the gap in the market for engaging online communities in specific sectors within pharma and life sciences, and why there's never been a better time to launch a company or a community using AI. Lastly, we talk about the role of content in community building. Hope you enjoy listening to this conversation, and I invite you to check out the other episodes of the podcast, which you can find on our website or by subscribing through your favorite podcast service. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Skiff Meetings podcast. Today, I am delighted to have with me Luke Bilton, the co-founder, or just recently co-founded a company called Life Science Networks. Luke, thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, Luke, I wanted to kind of start with who you are, your journey. I know you more from your recent work at Expo Platform, but tell us a little bit about how you got into events, how you found this thing called business events or the events industry or the meetings industry, and kind of your journey up until now.
Yeah, so I've been working in media and events now for the last 20 years or so. Started off in magazines back in the day. I was working across Condé Nast and national magazines and those kind of titles like Glamour and GQ and Vogue and that sort of thing on the marketing side. And then when I moved across to Future Publishing, that's when I really got the digital bug. And so Future continues to do some really, really cool stuff in terms of building global digital media brands that are like amazing in terms of their SEO performance, e-commerce, and Future was just sort of getting started with that. When I was there, and so I sort of got sucked into all of that and decided that's where I wanted to be on the digital side of publishing. And so from there, went on to a company called Chelsea Magazine Company, where I was the digital publisher there. Launched a bunch of websites and apps before going across to UBM. And so UBM, which then ultimately got swallowed up and acquired by Informa. So that was my first sort of experience, I guess, of B2B events. I'd been to shows like CES before, but I had no idea on how they came about, the machinations of it. And so that was my first sort of induction into this weird world of business events. I was at UBM. I was responsible for the digital content, the online communities, media brands that we were publishing.
And which shows were you working on, if you don't mind me asking? I think that always brings it home.
Yeah, we worked across a bunch of different verticals. So I was working in the security industry, which was shows, so UK-based shows like IFSEC, for example, IFSEC and FireX, health and safety events like Safety and Health Practitioner. And then TFM&A, which is a technology for marketing show. So UBM acquired the Content Marketing Institute at that time. So we were sort of like doing the UK side of stuff like that, and shows like Black Hat from the London office. We sort of incubate those. And then also aviation. Informa's got a really great aviation brand in Roots. And so that was like World Roots, Roots Americas, Roots Asia. That for me was really interesting, seeing the power of one-to-one meeting programs. It's really incredible, that whole operation of that sort of like speed networking that they do in aviation. And then getting me to what I'm doing now with Life Science Networks, I also started working across the pharma and healthcare side of what was going on at Informa UBM with my current co-founder, Chris Kilby. So Chris and I have worked together for years. Chris was responsible for some of those really big shows like CPHI, pharma, so some of the biggest shows in the pharmaceutical space. And so he was working on the event side, I was working on the digital side. But that's sort of where Chris and I first connected.
And so in between that and where you are today, you were with Expo Platform, and you wrote a pretty crazy, pandemic induced time with Expo Platform. I would imagine that must have been a different adventure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Expo Platform was and is great. I was there for about 2.5 years, and over that time we grew revenue by 300%. We went from when I started, we were at about 38 employees, and now we're around 120 or so. So that was really amazing experience actually working with Tanya and Makita and the team at EP. What I think that was really interesting for me was seeing how we went from being an in-person platform to being a virtual platform, and then back out to in person again, and trying to sort of ride that wave and trying to keep really close to our customers and try to figure out what their needs were, and make sure our product development stayed aligned with how the market was shifting. So it's been a really fascinating roller coaster actually working in event tech over the last couple of years.
Just to dig on that a little bit further, I don't want you to name any names, but do you feel that Expo Platform was one of the platforms or vendors that kind of rode that wave better? Because there was so many people that went, deep into virtual and then really struggled to kind of come back out of virtual. Do you find that Expo Platform was one of the ones that kind of managed to do that pretty quickly, or managed to kind of keep in touch with what the market was looking for?
Well, yes, but I think the reason for that is that it was founded as an in-person technology platform, with very strong roots in the exhibition industry and a client base who we knew what their needs were. So and the funding model actually I think is important. So Expo Platform, while it has had a bit of angel investment over the years, it's basically bootstrapping to revenue. So there aren't VC investors who were just putting inordinate amount of pressure on to scale through the pandemic. It was about sort of trying to stay close to our existing customer base and work with them, stay very customer focused. So I understand, why some of those companies that really peaked and troughed did it. But yeah, it didn't need to be that way. I don't think if companies stay close to their customers and aren't under pressure to overscale, then I don't think you have to go through that same peak and trough as everyone else.
Yeah, it's always interesting it sounds very obvious almost. Maybe obvious isn't the right word, but it sounds pretty clear now. But through the pandemic, I think we would be wrong to say that it was obvious, or at least in my view, nobody really knew what was happening, right? It was a very different environment. And at some points there was, people were saying that virtual events were all there ever was going to be, right? So there's this kind of, how do you clarify that? And I totally take your point of staying close to customers. I think that's very important.
There's a danger, I think, of the industry going too much back the other way and saying in person is the only game in town, when it absolutely isn't. I mean, if you look at how customer behavior has changed so much over that period, virtual events are nowhere near what they were at the peak pandemic, but they're still three to four times plus what they were before the pandemic, and people are so much more used now to remote working and connecting online. I think it's a mistake actually to go too far back the other way. Everything has changed, but maybe not quite as much as people thought at the center of it all.
Yeah, that's definitely what I'm seeing or what I'm sensing. The challenge, I think, is the people that really peaked are having a real tough time kind of resetting, right? Resetting expectations of investors, of leadership. And so I think we're still going through this phase of kind of resetting that's really interesting. And we've seen all these mergers and acquisitions and things like that. So I think that's all all comes with that. So, quick, kind of fun question that I do ask a lot of my guests, but kind of going back a little bit back to your career. How do you explain to your family and friends who are in the industry what you
Mhm.
do?
Um, with difficulty, I think. Actually, on the digital side of things, I think it's easier to explain to kids because various YouTubers and stuff like that. So when I say, "Oh, we've launched a podcast," that's a lot more understandable.
Mhm.
When I talk about events, yeah, the only experience that many people will have will be, I don't know, a festival or something like that. But on the digital side, it can be a bit easier, I think.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. But yeah, it is a question that I ask a lot of guests, and I think most people have this experience that explaining this sort of business events industry is not necessarily that simple. And like you say, if you don't have the experience of attending these events, it's hard to kind of understand how they come about.
The thing I always find hard to explain to my partner is why there are so many events for event people. That's the thing which I think she'll never quite understand and just thinks it's ridiculous. I, of course, think it's perfectly sensible.
Love it, love it. Great. And just to keep on this kind of events, last question about kind of events. What do you think makes events really good? Right. Because we could, like you say, there's many events in the event industry. But what in your mind makes it really worthwhile to attend an event, or what makes events really stand out? And I'm talking
Yeah.
any type of events, right? It can be a small conference or a big trade show, whatever you like.
So for me, and actually this is the same for a digital product as well, but there's three main elements which are involved around, and the weighting of the importance of those depends very much on the industry and what those particular audience needs are. But it's some combination of content, the connections, and the sort of the commerce, the transactions, and it completely depends on the audience and what their needs are. Um, the bits that get me particularly excited for business events are around the quality of matchmaking. I think, like, having a real purpose to be there, a very well structured meeting program. It's that type of bedrock which I think, particularly as it's getting harder, arguably, to justify taking time out of the office or the home to go to events. Having that sort of quality curated meeting program for me is a really important thing right now. And if you can combine that with delivering an amazing experience, so a really sort of, different experience. What I don't like personally is wandering into a huge cavernous trade show where I have to just sort of wander around and just figure it out myself. I think that can, particularly the really large ones, I think that can be quite confusing and quite bewildering. So some elements of that sort of curated connections, as well as being an amazing experience, which is why I always go back to routes, as I started talking about earlier. So the routes model in aviation is just fantastic. They're all about connecting airlines and airports through structured meeting programs, but it just so happens they do it in amazing destinations, and the destinations always pitch to have them bring the event there. So they really sort of roll out the red carpet, and they just make it just, an amazing experience that's also very valuable in terms of return on time for everyone.
Interesting. And what is it that the roots experience? What is it in the roots experience that stands out for you?
Well, I mean, it's quite an unusual one, I think, because their model is that the destinations will bid to have them attend. So Las Vegas will be pitching to have World Routes or Routes Americas turn up with them, and usually it's a big effort by the host city to get all of the world's airline route planners to come to experience their venue. So not just the venue, the city, the whole destination. So they'll generally put on tours, really like amazing evenings and food experiences. But at the core of it, it's still this really valuable one-to-one curated matchmaking.
Okay. So yeah, it's definitely, I feel like the matchmaking is the secret sauce in a way, or and does that have to be kind of active matchmaking, or can it be human matchmaking? Like, is there just a sort of intent of matchmaking? Is that what makes the difference, or does it have to be a software solution in a way?
Oh, it doesn't need to be software. Obviously, technology helps. Technology helps to enable all of these sorts of things. But I think there's still with matchmaking. I think there's still a role for human intelligence as well, and a concierge element as well to make sure it happens. I think technology will get there to a point where it could potentially be completely automated if you've got all of the right signals and the data to inform that. It's not impossible, I think, to have something that's really good and completely automated. But right now, I think there's definitely still a large human element in putting together really good programs. Having said that, a lot of the bits around it, of course, sending out agendas and calendar invites and all of those sorts of things, as technology enables that, makes it easier.
Great. So let's jump into Life Science Networks. Congratulations, launching
Thank you.
as co-founder. Tell us a little bit about the ethos behind this. Why this company? What is it, and why now?
Chris Kilby and I have been talking on and off for years, actually, about wanting to do something in this space. So the life science space, pharmaceuticals, biotechnology, is such a rich area for creating content, creating connections, creating events, communities. It's kind of got all of the good ingredients for an events business. It's incredibly complicated. So there's a real need for content. It's highly regulated. It's a global industry with a huge, diverse amount of suppliers, and there's always a need for it. There's always a need to bring people together to do deals for education. So pharma is a really interesting space. It's one that Chris and I know well. As mentioned, we've worked on some really big shows in pharma, and as well as running standalone projects for pharma companies like Vertex and others. So it's a great space. We know it, and the other thing is that at the moment, we think from our research, we think there are all sorts of opportunities to do things differently. So the current events which are in that space are great, and there's some huge and really successful events. But we think there are opportunities to start doing things a bit differently in a much more focused, targeted, and digital first way. So we've been doing a lot of research over the last month or so, and we were investigating various different micro communities within the whole pharmaceutical sort of umbrella industry. And within that, we've identified 4 or 5 different sort of like hot areas where we think a community approach would really work well. So we've been working on that. We've built an advisory board. We've got some great people involved from companies like GSK, Roche, Pfizer, all of the sort of the top pharma companies. We'd be getting input from them, which has really sort of helped sharpen up our thinking. I mean, it's an industry which has been massively impacted by COVID, of course, not in the same way as the event space. In fact, kind of the opposite to the events industry. So during COVID, the pharma industry went, had to very quickly do its own pivot, developing vaccines, but it was also under a huge amount of pressure to actually deliver those drugs. So the supply chain, the global supply chain for pharma, sort of shut down in many places. Manufacturing ground to a halt as the world went into lockdowns. And so while it's been a time of huge focus on the pharmaceutical industry, there have also been some very real issues which are continuing now as the world goes into a global recession. There's lots of regulation coming down the pipeline, like the Inflation Reduction Act in the US. That's going to make a huge challenges in terms of like the pricing and the costs of the industry. Sustainability is absolutely massive for this industry. The pharma industry can do a lot in terms of making the supply chain more sustainable. And also coming out actually quite strongly from our research is the need for a focus on diversity. And I think it's probably similar to most sort of STEM industries that the role of women is probably less than it should be, and also diversity in terms of supplier diversity as well. There's all sorts of very real pressures and challenges that the industry faces, and our feeling is that a community approach would be the best way to connect people year round. It's not to say that there's no role for events at all. It's absolutely not that. As I said, there's some really strong events in this space. At some point, we want to get to launching our own events in this space, but we feel that starting off in a digital first way is the right approach.
Okay, so break it down for me. Definitely understand life science, pharma industry. I think a lot of listeners will be involved or doing events in that industry as well. You're taking a community approach. Mm-hmm. What does that look like in practice? And I don't know how much of this is all worked out, but what's the business plan, if you will? Like, people join a community, it's an online community. Who pays? Like, how much are they paying? How does that work? Or what is your approach that you're taking?
So our approach is that any community we launch, we want to be laser focused on a particular job title, a particular persona. And this is why it's different, I think, from a larger event or trade show model where you generally would just invite everyone in that vertical. Everyone in fintech comes to this particular event. What we're doing is we're being entirely focused, and all of our research is really drilling into what are the specific needs and challenges of a particular persona, particular job title. So that's the starting point, and exactly what those communities look like, the balance of content, the balance of meetups and communications and events around that will vary dependent on what the needs are. So I think that's an important point, is that all of the products we create are going to be entirely based on a particular job title's needs. And then some of the things which I've mentioned about being very targeted in terms of the connections we make, matchmaking is going to be a really important part of this.
Can you give us an example? So just take a job title example and kind of take us through how you would build that out, or how you're planning to build that out.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So if you take one of the job titles we're researching at the moment is the procurement role. So procurement within the pharmaceutical industry, they are responsible for making sourcing and buying decisions across a whole different range of disciplines. So R&D, manufacturing, supply chain, packaging, all of those things has the procurement person at the center of it. And so they've got all sorts of pressures and challenges on them around things like how do you balance cost containment at this time of a global recession and inflation, cost containment versus the need to deliver quality products, for example. So from the research from that particular job title, we spin out from that a whole different range of challenges, a whole different range of topics, and around each of those hot topics, we're sort of trying to build out what's the best way, in a platform agnostic way, what's the best way for us to support them with finding answers to those questions. And so the sorts of things which are coming from the research are around peer-to-peer sharing of best practices. So they want to hear from each other rather than hear. I mean, there probably is a role for supplier education as well, but really we want to connect peer-to-peer, sharing their best practices, how they're dealing with those challenges. That can be through sort of workshops, virtual workshops. It could be through webinars. It can be through regular content which addresses those needs. So there are those sorts of challenges. And then when you go to things like diversity and how do you support the role of women in life sciences, then there's mentoring, which is a factor, um, as well as doing various sort of other initiatives around empowerment. And then in amidst all of this, the voice of the supplier is and it, we which we need to like regulate exactly what that voice is, because you don't want it to kill the community. But there definitely is a really important role of how do you connect people with the right suppliers, the right partners. For a role like procurement, that's actually a really important part of the role. And so how can we make sure that they're the right, curate it so that they're the right suppliers, they've got the necessary approvals, certification, sustainability and ESG standards. There's all sorts of ways, I think, that through an online community you can support these people in their goals.
Makes lots of sense, and it sounds like you've done a bunch of research, which is always good. And so, what is your offering? Is it a platform and a community manager? How does it work if people are kind of, they like the idea of joining a community of peers? What do they do if they join you or if they buy into this?
Sure. Yeah. So the various communities which we launch, they won't need to pay to start with. So members, if they're the right type of members, if they fit the profile, then it's free for them to use. And then they can join, they can get involved with the community groups, they can attend any of the content sessions, the matchmaking events, and sort of get involved with everything. So it's going to be supplier funded. We felt that was an important point because we don't want to put up any barriers to really engaging with this and the other audiences which we're currently investigating.
Yeah. And do you have your own platform, the online part of it, or where do the communities exist in the online world?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not really, I don't think, about the technology itself. So I think we're treating that in quite a sort of a tech agnostic sort of way. Particularly at this point where we're, I think, to politely call it pre-revenue. We want to just sort of set up a space using a combination of open source and readily available SaaS technology. That's not to say we'd always sit on that. As we go, we may say, well, there's a specific need here to buy and plug in a particular type of technology. But really, the approach is about trying to understand the customer needs and provide them with the right kind of content and the right kind of experience before we go too much down the rabbit hole about the tech, because tech can really help to enable some of those things, but we don't want to be reliant on it.
I definitely appreciate the approach of community before events. I think that's very important, and I always find going the other way around is challenging because you may have people that attend your events, but do they feel like they're a community? They can be part of many communities, and community is a word that's thrown around a lot. But are you kind of developing a new form of professional association that's very specific to job titles? Is that kind of where you're going?
I mean, I suppose you could see it that way. The way that we're describing it is as a next generation community and event business is the way that we position that. And so, I guess it could do some of what an association's doing right now, but we're sort of taking it, and what we mean by being a next generation approach is really putting the lean startup product development methodology right at the center of it. So digital first, trying to understand customer needs and iterating based on that, sort of at the center of it. So whatever that turns into, I think we'd be able to move a lot faster and in a much more agile way than a traditional association. And also, like in terms of how we're actually structuring the company, the way we're approaching sales and marketing, content development. We're trying to, out of necessity, we're trying to use as much automation, as many sort of AI-based tools as we can to enable us to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
part of the reason that we're here now, I think, is that post-pandemic, there's been so much development, particularly in the AI space, with tools like ChatGPT and everything else that's coming out. I don't think there's ever been a better time than now to actually take a leap and to launch something. Like you don't need to have um, a database in order to do something like this. You just need to get really good at using LinkedIn and to be able to really use LinkedIn as effectively as possible. You can create your audience. You can use all of these automation and all of these AI tools to give you a head start. There's still a real role for humans, of course, and that's I think the intellectual challenge of this is finding the right formula of humans and customer pain points and combining that with AI and other tech that we can get hold of to see can we do this basically initially from a very small team, hopefully scale. What we don't want to be doing is buying renting office space. I think there's real ways that you can be much more agile and disruptive by taking on all the advantages that's happened to society since the pandemic. There isn't a better time, I don't think, than this to be doing this kind of thing.
Yep, and looking at the latest advances in the AI, I think it'll keep getting better, right? So it'll keep
Yeah.
getting simplified. So one of the things that I think is always a challenge with communities, and I love the concept of community, but it is challenging, right? It takes resources, it takes a lot of energy and kind of resources to make it work. In terms of, you're looking for these communities with very specific job titles or very specific roles. And I think that makes sense. And that's something that I think associations sometimes don't do as well because they try to cover, a wide range. But then in terms of managing the content, in terms of managing that community and managing the communication, how are you going to get the right resources there to do that? Are you going to employ or have volunteers that are experts within that field to manage that? Or do you have those resources in-house? Like, how do you get somebody who knows what they're talking about, at least at some minimal level, that can actually be responsible for that small community or that kind of niche community?
Yeah, yeah, no, it's a great question. So when I was at UBM, large part of my focus there was what we called the content excellence program. And so content excellence, and I was working across all of the different content teams that we had within UBM EMEA, and we were looking at how can you make sure that the content you're producing is as laser targeted, as helpful as possible for your target audience, and that doesn't have to be traditional journalism. Now, I really like traditional journalism and the skills that come with journalism. I think they're incredibly powerful and can be applied in lots of different ways. But there is a lot of news which is already out there, and so what we're absolutely not trying to set ourselves up is as a news organization. That's not to say that we wouldn't employ editors or community managers further down the line, but there's already enough of it out there. So what I think we need to do is to curate that, take this whole glut of stuff that's there, find ways to, and there are lots of tools out there to help you to do that, to sort of find the most relevant stuff, to summarize it. So there's a curation job, and that should, I think, if we're not focusing on news, that would free up more of our time to do the higher value, more interesting stuff. So taking time to do face-to-face interviews, and really sort of like dive deep into what are the challenges. How did this person solve that particular challenge? That's what we want to be spending our time on, is on people.
Yeah. No, I hear you're definitely content focused, right? That is definitely a big part of it.
Mhm.
And tell me a little bit about the supplier side. So you said supplier kind of supported, right? So the idea is that then suppliers are going to be part of the communities. Are they going to play a different role to the kind of specific members? How do you see that shaping?
Yeah, it's something that we're still working through at the moment because we want to have the balance between it being a safe space without supplier pitches and people feeling like they can air their issues without interference. So ideally, you would sort of exclude suppliers from that whole conversation. But then in an industry like pharma, well, like many others, it's a bit more of a blurred line about which company is on the buy side, which is on the supply side, and lots of people fall somewhere in between. So it's something that we're going to have to, I think, monitor very carefully. We have clear community guidelines about what can and can't happen, um, and creating sort of opportunities to do that sort of purposeful matching between the members and suppliers. Because look, done well, it's a real value add to be able to be sat in front of five really innovative suppliers that actually could drive your business forward. That's a good thing, and we want to be able to set that up, but we just don't want it to be spam basically. So we're just trying to sort of, work our way through that. It's an ongoing challenge. So when I was a few years ago, I launched a data science event called DataX, and one of the things that we learned very quickly there, as we were sort of surveying the audience and lots of interviews and focus groups, was that the biggest brands in data science, the people that they really wanted to hear from, would be whoever's leading AI at companies like IBM and Microsoft, for example, who are also the suppliers. So it's not unusual, I don't think, for this particular industry. A lot of the time, the best suppliers can also be the people that the community wants to hear from. It's just how do you balance the thought leadership versus the commercial side of the conversation.
I think that yeah, there's a lot of different nuances there that I think are need to be explored in more detail. So
Yeah.
talk to me about sort of the long-term vision. What would you see as kind of really successful? If let's say 5 years time, something like that. What's your vision there?
It's still early days. I mean, this is the first interview we've done about it. The first time we've spoken to anyone actually outside of ourselves about what we're working on. I guess what good would look like for us would be establishing a number of communities of different sizes with an engaged user base. So we've kind of mapped out the whole pharma supply chain, from R&D all the way through to market access and how do they engage with regulators and digital engagement, digital marketing, which is really unique in pharma. There's all sorts of areas which we want to investigate further. So I think we ideally we'd like to have a number of these communities in play, each addressing a specific need. That's kind of our vision for life science networks. And then from that, we then spin off various events. So hopefully 2024, we're going to launch our first in-person event, um, and that would include the similar kind of mix of matchmaking and thought leadership in an in-person environment.
Hmm. And do you see this as a trade show kind of event or more of a conference, or I guess the community will tell you?
The community will tell us, and experience is the most important thing. So we absolutely won't be booking Excel initially. Much as I think Excel is a great venue, we want to start in I don't know, smaller, more bespoke venues. I think initially, and try to create experiences that are genuinely different. I mean, I don't think it takes much more budget. In fact, it probably takes less less budget, but just a bit more creativity to try to create sort of unique moments.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what if one of these pharma companies that you're probably speaking to and would be interested in enjoying the product, what if they say, hey, sounds like you guys have done a bunch of really interesting research. We have our own internal tool that people don't use, the community is not working. Why don't you come and be our advisor? Why don't you sell us your company, your research, and be part of this? Is that something that you would look positively on, or are you kind of very much about the independent community kind of approach?
I mean, it's not something that's part of our roadmap right now, but it's something which. So going back to UBN, one of the initiatives which was happening there at the time was this project called DSM, and the DSM project was all about creating communities with a different sort of approach. Our approach is quite different, but the idea there was to create communities for brands, and so we launched communities like Big Data Republic, for example. We launched that with IBM, and you sort of go to the different technology companies. And we had a Future Cities title, which was sponsored, I think, by Schneider Electric. So yeah, it's not impossible. I mean, this community approach can be once you've got the methodology locked down, it's definitely scalable. And it would be scalable outside of life sciences, but that's where we're focused. We want to get sort of deep into this industry because we think there's so much potential here. But yeah, who knows? Wouldn't be adverse to doing projects like that.
Never say never, right?
Exactly. And if you've got if you've got anyone interested, Miguel, send them my way.
Absolutely. So I want to zoom out a little bit from the company and what you're doing, and just get your thoughts on where the events industry is going, where business events is going in general. I mean, it sounds like you have an idea around the type of events that you would like to do in the future, which is, you mentioned experiences. What does that look like for you, or what do you see like a really strong model for business events that maybe we're heading towards?
Events with strong meeting programs are, I think, really important. So one of the events that we've been working on in my time at Expo Platform was GITEX, for example. So GITEX, big tech show in Dubai World Trade Center. That's a really strong event. It's one of those sort of like rock star sort of um, pillar brands where they'll bring people from all across the region to one great big event where they showcase all sorts of innovation. But then they also have, it's like a startup investor program which is taking part alongside it. I think GITEX is a good example of how something could scale. I mean, it's a very very large event. Money 2020, I always think is a really cool example of how they're sort of engaging the whole fintech industry, creating great experiences. I really like IMEX as well. I just generally I just like IMEX in terms of how they sort of like bring people together and have various different bring in different content partners and have different experiences running alongside the main event. Um, yeah, those to me feel like good examples. Yeah, I don't want to necessarily sort of write what we're going to be doing in the next sort of like 3 to 5 years. We want to really be led there by the community and what feels right at the time.
Within those examples, what is it that makes those events great? Is it
Mhm.
is it the bringing together of different types of people? I mean, you mentioned Money 2020. I also have a very positive impression of Money 2020. I've never been, but
Mhm.
what do you see as being kind of really innovative about Money 2020, or kind of what are they doing that you think is really worth kind of other people learning from?
I really like actually shows like Brighton SEO by Kelvin.
Hmm.
I think that's a great example of someone who's just gone out, something that he's passionate about, and he's created this sort of groundswell of community, lots of really good sessions, but it's got a good solid heart to it. I think most of the brands, most of the big events that you think of, they had an interesting origin story at some point where the founders went out, they identified a need, and through their passion and their dedication, they created something, and they brought together a community around it and created something that's really valuable. It's easy, I think, for that sort of origin story to get lost over time, particularly when there are companies who've sort of acquired it and then acquired it again. I think the new teams often sort of, over the years, that original purpose gets lost. So I think any event has a very clear purpose and a reason for being there. And I want my own origin story.
I like it. I like it. Origin story. Maybe that's the title of the podcast. I think that makes a lot of sense. So I want to wrap up with the final question that we ask everybody, which is, please suggest a guest that we should have on the podcast so we can continue to have these great conversations. Someone that you know and respect and you think would be relevant to our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the first person that springs to mind when you say that is Robin Duda. Robin's great. We worked together, and with Chris actually, we all worked together at UBM. UBM, by the way, was just a great place for meeting really smart, fun people who cared about the experience, cared about customer, and Robin is absolutely one of those people. So she's very focused on experience. She's worked with, apart from doing like business events, she's also worked with the likes of Spotify and Coke, and she's always someone I'd go to for a bit of inspiration.
Okay, great. Thank you for the suggestion, and then we'll be in touch. Robin, if you're listening, we'd love to have you on the podcast. So do join us or do get in touch. Luke, it's been a pleasure. I wish you lots of luck. Thank you for previewing or being the first to be on the first time that you're speaking about your new company with us. So I wish you lots of luck with that, and we'll be following that very carefully and looking forward to your advice on community building as you go through the process. It sounds like there's a big challenge ahead, but also lots of opportunities. So wish you lots of luck for that.
Fantastic. So thanks so much for the opportunity, Miguel. Appreciate it.